Hey everyone, welcome to Draw Anime Academy. My name is Christina, and I will be showing you a small demo of how to draw an anime girl face. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's first start by drawing a circle, right? It doesn't have to be a perfect circle, just a circle, right? This is the cranium of the head. You want to divide that in half. For girls, I tend to make it a little bit shorter, just because it looks cuter, but about here would do good. And then you want to drag the lines down, and as it gets closer to the chin, you want to start curving it down to a point. Now don't make it too sharp, just make it slightly rounded off. You want to do the same thing on the other side. Now if you're having trouble with making the other side symmetrical, I suggest that you basically plot out your landmarks of the face, such as the jawline, and basically draw a line here and be like, okay, this is where it curves. Here, this is where it starts going down, right? And that makes your head look more symmetrical. Because what I noticed a lot of beginners do is when they start drawing the other side, they're like, is it like this, right? And then they make one side lopsided. Or is it if it's like this, and then they make the other side too thin. So, and I struggled with this a lot when I was a kid. And so what I did was I just drew a line across from where the curve started, and then I basically just used that as a landmark, right? And that made it a lot easier for me too. And it made me draw heads better, especially when I've drawn this so many times. But once you start getting the hang of, drawing in heads, then this will be like a no-brainer to you. You'll start flipping the canvas and be like, wow, that actually looks pretty good. So let me try and test. Actually, I'm gonna try and flip the canvas when I'm further into the drawing. But for now, this is where I'm going to do. Well, this is what I'm going to do. So now let's go ahead and put in the proportions of the features. So typically on a normal head, right, if this is a normal head, normal female head, the face would generally be longer, right? Usually the eye line would be about the center of the head, from here to here. That's about the center. And then the nose would be about half that distance, the bottom of the nose, and then half that distance from the nose to the chin is the mouth. Pretty simple, right? In anime, that's a little bit different. Now, this also depends on the artist, right? Some artists make their eyes, narrower. Some people will make their eyes a little bit bigger. But this all depends on the cuteness factor. Usually in the cuteness factor, the eye line will tend to be a little bit lower, right? This will be basically the halfway point. Although it's not really a halfway point, it's like a third or 2/3 the distance. The nose line would roughly be a little bit lower, and same with the mouth. Typically, the closer the nose line and the mouth line are to the eye line, it tends to look a lot cuter. And generally, this isn't where, the eye line, or where the eye is directly placed. It's just more of like an estimate. You don't have to follow this to a T. Generally, I like to make the eyelid, a lot higher than the actual eye line, just because it kind of gives me some room, right? This is sort of like my limit, or close to my limit. I usually make the eyes, about this size here, close to the nose line, just because it looks proportional to the face. So I'm going to add another layer here, and I'm going to show you some mistakes to avoid when you're drawing eyes. Don't make the eyes too big. I know this looks weird, but a lot of people make their eyes way too big because they are focusing way too much on the eyes and they're not looking at the overall picture of the face. Some people make it too small and too far apart, so their eyes look like this. This looks like nightmare fuel. Some people put it too close together. They make the eye too big, or they make the eye the same, a good size, but then they draw the eyes too close together. And to avoid those problems, you have to understand the proportions. So this is, of course, depending on the artist, but I like to make the size, as I mentioned earlier, about here. And I want to make sure that the distance between the eye is about one eye apart. So for instance, I'm going to be drawing in the shape of the eye here. I'm just going to be drawing a kind of a round eye, but a little bit sharp towards the end. And this is my limit here, right? It's close to the nose line. It's getting close here, but it's not too, it's not too close, right? Here, I also make sure to leave a little bit of spacing here, because in real life, we do have that spacing, right? This is the other plane of the face, the side plane, and your eye doesn't necessarily go past that. So one eye apart roughly, right? It doesn't have to be exact, but usually about that much. You want to draw the other eye. And the reason why I don't draw, one eye first and then the other is because that tends to lead to more mistakes. That tends to make my eyes asymmetrical. If I draw the eyes at the same time, I can prevent that mistake. So technically the eye line should be about here, but it doesn't really matter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to thicken the eye line. And another mistake that people make is they just leave the eye line at this thickness. That makes the eye look very flat and shallow, and it doesn't really work well. You want to make sure they have nice thick lashes for that cuter look. All right, so thicken this area. Make sure this area is this, pointy area here, the corner of the eye here is a little bit thicker than the rest. Other than that, keep everything else uniform. The bottom of the eye would usually be kind of where the eye line was, or would be, right? I'm just going to place it here because it actually looks like a pretty decent size. And then we can draw in the pupils. Now, try not to make the pupils too filled. 80-20 is a good ratio. And to make her look like she's looking at you, place the pupils a little bit closer to the center, but not too close to the center or else she will look cross-eyed. Right, so far this looks pretty good. I'm gonna adjust the nose and move it upward a little bit more because I think that looks cuter that way. And I'm also going to add in the mouth. Now the mouth, I'm actually going to make it more open. And when it comes to the mouth, I like to round out the top instead of making it straight like this or like this, right? Try not to make your mouth like a triangle or a semicircle. You want to round out the lips, imply, the full lip without drawing the full line. So for instance, it looks better when there's a bit of a blank space, and that's because that's called indication. If you give too much information, like even if you have the perfect shape, but if you have, this line here looks too harsh. So you just want to soften that area a little bit and just emphasize the sides. And don't make the mouth too big either. Just make it appropriate, right? You want to give some distance between the nose and the chin, because if you have the spacing of the chin too small like this, it just looks strange. Then we can add a little bit of the teeth and make that round as well, because generally teeth go around in a sphere, right? They're not straight like this. They're curved like that. So that's the tip for drawing teeth. And so far, she's looking pretty cute. Add in some eyelids. Now try not to make the eyelids like this. Once again, you want to indicate, right? If you want to draw a full lid, you just want to draw in the beginning and a little bit at the end. But I usually like to start from the beginning and that's it. Then draw in your lashes. I like to make the corner of the eye a lot more tapered. And then for the eyebrow line, you don't want to make it too high like this or too low like this. You want it just in the middle. And keep it simple. You don't have to try and make it too thick. Another thing that beginners tend to do is they avoid drawing eyebrows. I used to do this same thing, and because I used to think eyebrows looked ugly. I used to think that, oh, the eyebrows will ruin my drawing, because I just didn't know how to make the eyebrows look good. I always made them look too thick. And that's because when you're a kid or just when you're a beginner, you think of the face in straight lines or just what you see. When you see, an eyebrow, you think line, when in reality it's hairs, right? You're not thinking in nuance when you're a beginner. You're thinking in what's the graphic shape. And that can be a good strength because, that's simplified, right? For instance, the reason why people draw eyes like this almond shape here is because that is what they see. That's the graphic shape. What they don't realize for an artist is that for an artist, the artist sees, changes in the eye, right? They see, a diamond shape and a rounder bottom lid. They see, the tear duct, right? They see multiple details that the normal person wouldn't really see. So you want to try and break out of those habits as fast as you can, because when you break those habits, your art will start looking more professional. So what I'm going to do is the big test here. And I'm a little bit nervous because since I'm doing this live, I don't want to embarrass myself. But for the sake of the video, I am going to. I'm going to flip this and see if this looks good. If not, I'm going to cry. Yeah, you see, it's not bad, but it could, it could do a little bit of fixing. But that's really easy because all we really need to do is go to Liquify, go to Filter. Where's Liquify? Liquify. Come on, Photoshop. And then what we can do is we can just kind of cheat it a little bit, right? We can just bring that up. We can extend that line. Actually, yeah, we can just do that for now. And then we can change the drawing just a little bit more, right? So here, I would actually suggest that you guys do flip your canvas often because you don't want your end result to look weird, right? But it's close enough that it doesn't look hideous. It happens to everyone. Even professionals have, the same problem. Just move everything according to, whatever side. Like if you want this side to look more symmetrical to this side, then fix accordingly. That's good enough. Let's flip again. Not too bad. In the end, this is just a demo. I'm not going to worry myself to death, right? I still think that this mouth, should be moved this way. Okay, that's good enough. I'm not going to worry about it too much unless I start getting my OCD kick in, right? So this is good enough for now. Let's add in a little bit of details like the highlights of the eyes. Now the highlights of the eyes, they can be any shape. Generally, it's a shape of what the light is, what the light source is, right? If it's a bulb, it'll look round. If it's, the sun, it can look more rectangular. If it's like actually no, it's more like a wider oval. If it's like a camera light that has, light panels, then it will look more circular. Anyways, or not circular, but look more rectangular. So then you want to draw on the pupils. And I kind of shade them a little bit just to give some depth, but this is good enough for now. Then what you want to do is you want to draw on the neck. Try not to make it too thick like this or too thin. You want a healthy ratio, right? You want it just small enough that it makes her look petite and cute. I would say just a little bit smaller. And you can simplify this into a cylinder as well. But because we're doing a kind of a bust shot, we don't really need to worry about that too much. We're just going to draw up to the shoulders. So now let's give her some hair, right? We don't want this to just not have any hair. The hairline isn't here. It's not close to the scalp at all. It's actually a little bit lower. I would say just about here, right? And that is typically where your hair will radiate from. Now, if you want to start here, that's totally fine. I'm going to start here, right? And have it swoop more to the side, right? So I'm going to create my strands going in this direction. Now watch as I draw in the hair. It's overall, I'm varying the sizes of my strands, right? They're not like this. You don't want to draw your strands like this. You want to draw it, different multiple pieces at a time and overlap your lines. And that will make good looking hair, right? Let's draw the other side. Let's give her a little hair clip because why not? That's cute. Let's give her a little bit of layering in her hair, right? I like to add in a strand of, or 2 strands of large clumps of hair and then curve it out and then curl it in to frame the face. I like to puff it out past the scalp just because it looks a lot cuter that way. If it looks a little bit too extreme, you can always tone it back down, which I will. But notice how when I'm drawing hair, I'm keeping in mind of the silhouette. I'm drawing in strands that in my head, I'm just like, oh, this will look good when it's popping out a little bit more. Oh, well, this graphic shape will look good if there's a little bit of a pocket of opening here, or an opening here, right? And a lot of these things, those habits you will develop when you become better, right? Right now, as a beginner, if you're a beginner watching this, a lot of the time you're just thinking about trying to make it look good. But you have to understand the design principles, and then your drawings will look a lot better, right? So here, let's draw on the top of the head. When I draw hair, I tend to not make it stick to the scalp. If the scalp is here, I'm not gonna, make the hair end here. I'm actually gonna give a little bit of spacing from the top. And that makes it look a lot better. Here, looks a little bit too bold, so I'm going to just alter this a little bit by adding a few more strands to frame her face and layer in the strands, right? And then I'm going to add in some braids. Or I can just, instead of braids, I can just add in a little pigtail here. Let's see how I'm going to do this. I think I'm just going to start her pigtails up here, and then I'm going to arch them so that they go into a wave later on. I'm going to try and zoom out better. There. And then here I'm curving in the hair strands so that they show different sides. So notice how, this looks like it's twisting because you have 1, 2, and 3 sides showing. Whereas if you just draw one shape like this, it doesn't look very good because it's not very dimensional. So you want to try and twist, multiple strands. And once you have that main hair clump done, then you can basically separate the strands out. You want to poke some strands out to change the shape a little bit, right? You want to add some tension strands here because that's being tied. And you want to add some motion lines just to show the twist, right? You can even show some in here as well. And then let's give her a small, outfit. Let's give her a little bit of a collar. You can just do this by drawing in a simple shape and then some frills. If you want, you can even add a little bit of a shadow, but actually, in my opinion, I think her neck looks a little bit too long now, so I'm going to just extend this upward. That looks better. And let's add a little bit of a ribbon, because why not? It's cute. Alright, so you thought this was done, right? We're about 20 minutes in, and no, we're not going to be done, because I'm going to do a color wash. Why not, right? I wanted this to look pretty. So let's go ahead and get started by first, I'm just going to duplicate this just in case if I ruin it. Always duplicate, layer or like a step in your process that you don't want to get rid of because you think it looks nice. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a layer underneath. So this is my sketch layer, right? This will be my color layer. And I'm just going to choose some colors. So when it comes to, color picking, I don't like making colors too saturated like this. A lot of the time, anime drawings aren't that saturated. They may look saturated, but it's really not. So her skin is going to be rather fair, so it's probably going to go for more of like an orangish, pinkish tone. Usually there's different tones of skin color. Like this is a pretty like rosy kind of skin color. This is more like yellow in tone, more for sportier girls, and maybe even a little bit darker, right? This is more of a yellowish tone, which is really good for guys. I'm going to go for more of this tone here, just because that's kind of how I envisioned her in my colored imagination, or in my imagination. So I'm just going to go ahead and just roughly color this with my brush. I don't care what brush you use. A lot of the time, I'm just using a basic round brush with a little bit of opacity to it. Actually, that is the brush that I'm using. This is from the Ahmed Aldori brushes here, and I just got the brush pack. Anyways, this brush is golden. I love it because it has a good opacity and it's just really easy to use. I've been using this brush for a lot of my pieces. Anyways, so I'm just going to be filling in this whole area here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shade in areas where the light is not hitting it. So if I'm going to, based on the highlights here, the light's going in front of her. And generally that is a very easy lighting setup because all you really need to do is just color in or shade in areas that have overlaps, right? Like hair, for example. The hair is in front of the skin, so I'm just going to add shadows in front of there. And remember when I mentioned that the nose shouldn't be too detailed? This is why. I'm going to add a white highlight. And I'm just going to add a little bit of a side value to that. I like doing this just because it makes it look a little bit more dynamic. You don't have to do this. In fact, you could even just leave it alone and instead, put a shadow on top like that as well. But when you just leave the nose looking like this, you can go multiple ways. You could even go like this, right? I like to do this one here because even though it's not necessarily possible unless you have a side light here, it just makes it look a lot brighter. I'm going to color in the whites of the eyes, just kind of like a faint white color. So right now you see me using white. However, because this brush is a lower opacity, the actual color is actually a little bit off white. So just keep in mind of that. Don't use pure white a lot of the time. Pure white or pure black, don't use just because that's not very natural. It makes things look flat. I'm going to make the teeth also a little bit white as well. Remember, it's not actually white, it's just a little bit off white. I'm going to take a slight pink color, darken it just a tiny bit, and then I'm just going to color in the mouth. And then I'm going to take a darker tone, preferably within the same range, or actually a little bit more pink. I'm going to add in the corners, which is the shadow. This is like the tongue, and this is like the inner corners of the mouth, right? That makes it look nice. In fact, I just prefer to not really have that. I actually just prefer it to look like this. And then let's add a little bit more shadow around the sides of her face, right? Anywhere where there's overlaps, especially around the chin area, underneath the neck. Usually there'd be a giant shadow cast underneath. So how do you choose shadows? Well, I choose shadows based on the tone of skin, right? Here, as you can see, it's kind of a more orangish tone, and the shadow is a little bit rosier. In fact, it could even go a little bit more pink. I like to choose contrasting tones of temperature, right? I like to, if my skin is warm like this, I like to move my color to a little bit more of a warmer tone. I mentioned this is actually a cooler tone because it's leaning more towards green, but get a rosier reddish tone, and I might as well say radish, and then sketch it underneath, right? If these colors look interesting, that's great. Now, what you don't want to do is just move it down like this because that makes the skin look really flat. The next best thing you could do is just choose a more saturated tone and color it down, right? And color it in here. However, move the colors, in different temperatures and also up the saturation just a little bit, and you will get a more dynamic shadow. So that's what I did for this girl here. I'm also going to add a tiny gradient around the cheek area. That's a little bit lighter. And then I'm going to add in some blush. Now I'm going to change my brush to a softer brush here. And I'm just going to add in very, very lightly the blush. Just think of this as like makeup. And it won't go wrong. So we got the skin pretty much done. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Now let's go ahead and draw in the eyes. Now I'm kind of imagining her eyes to be magenta. And what I like to do for eyes is I like to actually, because it's good that I duplicated it because I'm going to alter this a little bit. I like to erase the inside of the eye because I'm going to add in the details of the eye with colors instead and value. So I'm just going to fill in, whoa, that's a bad one here. I'm going to use this one. It's a bad brush. So I'm going to use this color here, and this is my midtone. I like to add in the midtone because then I can basically change the direction. You know, I can go darker and I can go lighter, and it will just be easier. If I go dark first and then medium, it starts looking a little bit messy. So I always start off with a medium tone. This is kind of like a cooler magenta, actually kind of a warm magenta color. I'm going to go for more of a warmer tone, dark, deepen the color. Actually go for more almost a violet, and then I'm just going to block in my shadow and my pupils. I'm going to add in the highlights last this time. And in this case, what I like to do is I like to make the pupil outline a lot darker. It's easier to see. And then shade in this dark area, really dark. But I want to leave a little bit of this medium tone here, just because I want it to look more like a gradient instead. And just because I'm going to be an overachiever, I'm going to take a really, really dark purple, this bluish purple here, and add in the darkest dark up here. This is because, once again, as I mentioned, the darkest part is closest to the highlight, and I want to add that in there. For the bottom part of the eyes, this looks a little bit flat right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for more of like a rosy pink, and then just add in that touch of brightness into her eyes, and even a little bit of yellow. So I like, combining yellows with violets or reddish violets, just because they almost look like a transition. So I like doing that. And last but not least, let's add in the highlights. Now, before we add in the highlights, let's kind of do a little bit of a cheat. Let's take a kind of a slightly blue color, and then just very, very lightly, if you're going to be using a brush with opacity, do this. If not, you can use a gradient, or you can use a lasso tool, select this, and then just, color it in lightly with a gradient tool. But anyways, taking this blue here, just shade it in really lightly. And this is basically the color of the sky reflecting onto her eyes. And this will make your eyes pop out like mad. It's crazy. I love using this. Take a very light purple now. And then let's draw in her pupils, or not pupils, her highlights. You can see how much more radiant this looks now. In fact, the closer it is to white, the brighter it looks. If you want, you can even add in a little bit of a smaller highlight right next to it, because why not? That looks cute. And then even one on the side. And that's how you color in anime eyes and make them juicy. So, and one more optional thing is change your brush mode to a color dodge. Take in this nice brown hue, make it dark, and then add it in very lightly at the bottom. And you can see that the saturation is brightened up a lot. But just a tinge, right? So, looking pretty good. I know we're 10 minutes in now for just the skin and the eyes, but now let's go ahead and draw the hair. So for the hair, I'm imagining, maybe a blonde hair color, or almost kind of like a honey blonde. So I'm going to go for more of like an orangish, yellowish tone. And I actually like that hair color here, so I'm going to color pick that. And I'm just going to fill this in really quick. So on my courses on Udemy, I tend to make really long videos, and I'm starting to catch that bug too on my YouTube videos. I know that a lot of my Udemy students like this just because they can see everything that I do, and I like explaining things, so I hope you guys don't mind the length of this video. I know that there's a lot of draw with me videos as well, but I'm hoping that this tutorial also helps. So I'm just, putting in a very rough wash. And this is all on one layer, by the way, just because this is a colored sketch. So don't, stress too much about it. So we have our base, once again, start off with a medium tone. Now let's test a few shadows here. If I choose the same shadow and go down here, looks boring, right? If I go for more of an orangish tone though, and I saturate it just a little bit, wow, that looks a lot better. So I'm going to use that tone. And once again, we're shading in the direction of where the light is facing us. So, and this is easy because our light is facing directly in front of us. So any, form that's going away from us, this is called, usually if you just have kind of like a direct source of light that's kind of ambient, that is called lighting of incidence lighting. That's what it's called. For instance, I'm just going to draw in a sphere here. Lighting of incidence is basically the light source is just wherever your eye is, looking at, and then everything else is just kind of going in shadow away from it, right? So this is basically what we're doing for this girl here. So once again, I'm just adding in shadows just based on that lighting of incidence. So any area that is going away from us, such as this, is going to be in shadow. Any bit of corners, here and there, can shade away. And any turning edges, right, you want to emphasize. So the inner corners of the vortex or the swirl will be in shadow, right? If you want, you can even go a little bit more saturated around the shadow areas here, just to make it that much more interesting to look at. Then what I like to do is I like to take a really, really dark brown and because this is this brush has opacity, it won't go super dark. I like to just push out the inner corners of her face, right? Areas where her hair is, being completely blocked from the light, right? And so far, this is what it looks like. So here, just adding a little bit more details. And lastly, we are going to add in some highlights. I like to add a more yellowish highlight for this because, I like contrasting tones or contrasting temperatures, right? If this is kind of like a warm yellow, I'm going to make the highlight cooler yellow or more yellowish. And I'm not going to go, decked out in highlights. I'm just going to indicate the forms of the hair. Highlights aren't about, shapes or, cute hearts around the hair. It's about wrapping your light around the form. Right. Do the same thing here. Gonna add a little bit where the curves are being pushed out because that's where the light is touching it. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a kind of a sharper brush here. I'm going to clean it up with some sharp tones or sharp brush strokes here, just to make it look a little bit neater, because right now it looks a little bit messy because of all these strokes, right? So I'm just going to neaten it up. Let's add a slight shadow underneath her eyelid because it's not completely white. There's a shadow underneath. Let's add a little bit of a color wash on her collar. Let's make the ribbon red. I'm going to flatten out some of these shadows here as well. Just more like finishing touches, right? And what I'm going to do next, and notice actually how I didn't use a lot of lines to detail in my hair. I'm using the shadows, the shadows to detail out the rest of my hair, right? This is because it gives me a lot more room to paint. This is kind of like introductory painting a little bit. When I don't use my line work to do all the work for me, I use color and I use values, and that becomes easier to deal with. So people who don't know how to paint and be like, oh, well, how do you paint? You basically take out the line work like this. And I know it looks hideous right now, but basically after everything else, you just fill in a darker value. Okay. So now let's add in the final touches. I'm going to press Command U, Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just duplicate that. Oh, that's actually a lot nicer. Let me see what that looks like. Without, with, without, with. Okay, I don't mind that, so I'm going to just lower the opacity on that and then just do that. Anyways, so I duplicated this so that I can modify this a little bit. Oh, and I forgot to draw in her clip. Clip's going to be kind of like a teal, light teal. Anyways, I'm going to press Command U. Let me do one more thing here. I'm just going to erase this area here because I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed at it. Okay. Now let's press Command U. And let's up the saturation just a little bit. Oh, that looks nice. So see, I like adding saturation at the end just because it just looks nicer. I don't have to fix as much stuff, along the way. As you can see, this is what it looks like without the saturation. With saturation, just a tiny bit makes it look really, really nice. Alright, so that is pretty much it for this video. I know that this was a little bit long, but I just really want to show you the process and make it look nice. So I hope that this was helpful for you. It was definitely a fun thing to do for me. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, be sure to, leave a comment down below and tell me what you think. Not only that, but if you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.